George Eustice, the MP for Camborne and Redruth, and also the former Environment Secretary, joins me in the studio now. Thank you for coming in, George. Lovely to see you. Shall we start with Natalie Elphicke? Because
if you want to.
Are you reluctant to? I mean, the word weird springs to mind. That was so strange on Wednesday. What did you make of it all?
Well, she is quite an erratic, individual, erratic politician. So it is an unusual.
What do you mean by that?
I think she's a bit unpredictable. It's never quite clear to work out where she's been on the political spectrum or what she wants. I have to say, I'd kind of rather assumed that she was going to carry on and stand again, and assumed that the seat in Dover she could stand as the Labour candidate. And I don't know whether, she didn't announce she was going, I think, when she first said it. That came a few hours later. And I sort of wonder whether she assumed it would come her way. But I don't know. I mean, we can only obviously look at these things.
Would you categorise her as a loss to the Conservative Party? How would you categorise it?
Well, look, I think she's been a difficult, she's been an outlier within the Conservative Party, so I don't quite know how she fits within the Labour Party, to be honest. And I think the real thing here, and we've seen obviously further stories coming out, that this has backfired a bit on Keir Starmer. And I think the lesson for him is it's not just about doing something clever for PMQs and getting a defector to sit behind you on the benches for that one-off event. You do have to think a bit about these sorts of decisions and the message you're trying to convey as a party. And people want to see that there's an opposition leader who looks like he's a prime minister in waiting, thinking about the serious things, not, fritting around trying to find a defector to get some tactical gain. And I think it's backfired on him. And I suspect that the shadow cabinet will be saying to Keir Starmer, never again do something like this without consulting us first and getting our agreement for it.
I mean, Nigel Nelson's suggesting that there may be more defections on the cards, that One Nation Tories are looking at Labour and thinking, well, they're much improved since the Corbyn days. Maybe we should entertain this because we want to retain our seats.
Well, I think that's quite a dishonourable way to behave. And my view on defectors, I'm probably similar to David Cameron on this. I think everyone, when you go into politics, you choose a party that's closest to your own views. And everyone in politics will have some issues where they differ from the mainstream view in their own party, whether they're Labour or Conservative. But under our system, you pick a party that's closest to your views. And my view is you should stick with them. And look, as a backbencher, if there are things the government's doing that you disagree with, well, then you are free to vote the other way and to vote with the opposition on certain bits of legislation. But I think defections it's quite a dishonourable way to behave, in my view. Sure. I think it's quite craven. I think it says more about the individual who defects than it does about the party that they're defecting from.
It wasn't a great week last week because as well as the defection, we then had Nadeem Zahawi, who's a very experienced former cabinet minister, deciding that he's going to stand down at the next general election. That takes the number of Tories who are going to stand down to 64. You're one of those number. Does that show a lack of faith in government, your decision, his decision, Dominic Raab's and others, to not stand again? No,
it doesn't. And I think people can read too much into this. If you look at 2019, a lot of people stood down then. In fact, you can look at any general election down the ages. 2010 election, lots of people stood down. Lots of Labour MPs stood down at that point.
It doesn't show much confidence in Rishi Sunak, though, does
I think it's more the case that the days of somebody becoming an MP and then wanting to stay there right to the end and right through retirement, I think there's changed. People's aspirations have changed. In my case, I'll be 53 by the time of the next election.
Still a young whippersnapper.
Well, exactly, but young enough to do something else.
Yes.
And I've always been someone in life, when I was David Cameron's press secretary, but decided to close the chapter on that and move on to become an MP. I've always been someone in life who believes you shouldn't linger on the final page of the chapter. You should, proactively close that chapter and move on to the next chapter in life. And that's what I'm doing. I think it's what many of my colleagues are doing as well.
But
and it happened as well.
Colleagues also just putting a finger in there and thinking to themselves, I'm probably going to lose my seat. I don't want to be in opposition for years. Therefore, I'm getting out now. I mean, it does seem a little bit like people are jumping off a sinking ship.
Well, I don't really agree, because I think they'll have different MPs will have different reasons. Some will want more time with their family. Some will want a change of career, like me. Some will be close to retirement and feel that it's time to step down. They all have different reasons. The key thing is this is not a new phenomenon. So more MPs stood down in 2019 after that dreadful deadlock that we had over Brexit.
Yes.
A very large number of MPs stood down in 2010. This is often the way way that it goes. People do, 10, 15, 20 years sometimes in Parliament, and then they want to change. So you do get elections where people decide to stand down, and you sometimes get more standing down in some elections than others, but every election has a lot of MPs who consciously themselves decide that they want a change and step down.
Just before we go on to talk about sort of the Tories' electoral hopes, you mentioned David Cameron there. Obviously, you know him very well. Lots of people are saying that he's positioning himself to return as leader of the Conservative Party at some point. He's recording these very slick videos at the Foreign Office, and he's almost acting like RPM overseas. Do you agree with that analysis?
I would be surprised if David Cameron wanted to come back and lead the Conservative Party.
Why?
He's done that before. Now, my reading is, and I know David Cameron obviously quite well, having been his press secretary. He's actually he's a very public-spirited person, and I think he would have felt, looking around the world, that there are all sorts of massive global challenges: the war in Ukraine, the situation in Gaza. And, when he had the call from Rishi Sunak to say, would you come and help us on this and be Foreign Secretary? It's really not complicated. David Cameron just would have thought, I've had the call, I've been asked, and I've got a duty to do this for my country. If people think I've got something to ask, something to offer, then I should do that. And I think that's all it was, really. And I'm delighted that he's back, because I think he's brought some gravitas to our foreign policy position.
Yes.
I think he's carefully recalibrated our stance on Israel and Gaza. It's very difficult, but I think early on there was a danger that the government weren't quite getting that right. They were, a bit too much on Israel's side and not enough recognising the illegal settlements and some of the things that Israel had got wrong. And I think David Cameron's carefully recalibrated that, actually in a good way. So I'm delighted that he's back. I think he's throwing himself at it with an immense amount of energy. But I would be surprised if he wanted to return to being leader.
I know you're also quite close to Boris Johnson. Would you be surprised if he wanted to return as leader?
I would, actually, yes. And I think it's
Do you
one
think
of those
we're
jobs.
Overblowing this in the press, that this idea of these Cincinnati-style comebacks?
I think it doesn't happen very often in our system. Look, in an American presidential system, you've almost got these political dynasties, and the people can come back, and the wife or the son of a president actually ends up being president themselves 10, 20 years later, a bit like the Bush or the Clintons, for instance. Under our system, it tends not to happen. It's a very contested system, and in some ways more meritocratic, in that anyone can become prime minister, whether they've got financial means or not.
It's the sense that he's obviously hinted at it, and also this desire to sort of appear Churchillian. Obviously, Winston Churchill had a second term, after he'd had a break from politics, and this suggestion you might do the same thing, but you don't think that's on the cards?
We'll see. I think it's unlikely, if I'm honest. I think under our system, you have your shot at it. It's exhausting while you do it. In both Boris and David's case, they did it for 3 years and 6 years respectively, and they probably feel they've done that bit.
But do you think the Tories would be in a better place right now if Boris Johnson was still at the helm? I mean, the polling's looking dire. You've got big beasts jumping ship. You've got MPs defecting and maybe more to follow. Rishi Sunak says his plan is working. It doesn't seem to be working because it's not moving the dial, is it?
Well, I think the challenge here is, and, it was very difficult in those final months with Boris Johnson because, he had lost the confidence of the Conservative Party with all of those rows about parties. And the trouble is, a Prime Minister can't really carry on once they've lost the confidence of their own party, in essence, and that's what had happened. So I remained loyal to Boris Johnson to the end.
I know.
Partly for the reason that under our system, it's actually not easy to change party leader and change prime minister when you're in government. It's quite a risky thing to do. It's not an easy manoeuvre to do. And we've tried to do that now several times. David Cameron went, and we had Theresa May, and then we had, Boris Johnson, and then, of course, Liz Truss briefly. It's very difficult. And I think the more chopping and changing we've done, the more the public have...
Although...
created a settled view that they're not sure that they want to give us another go.
And I appreciate what you're saying there, because I think there has been far too much chopping and changing. However, if the Tories lose the next general election, Rishi Sunak's not going to stay at the helm, is he?
Well, unlikely. But I mean, when prime ministers lose elections, they do. This day and age, they tend to step down. But look, my view on Rishi...
You haven't got any skin in the game post whenever the election is. OK, you're going to go off and do something else. So tell me genuinely, who would you like to see run the Conservative Party after Rishi Sunak? Who would be your pick? And I know there isn't a vacancy now, but just tell me.
Well, there's not a vacancy, and we don't also know who will be around after the election. And
who
also,
might be left from the wreckage?
I'm going to avoid the temptation to get into that.
Oh, come on, George.
Well, for two reasons. One is I won't be an MP at that point anyway, because I'm standing down, so I won't be.
You must have your eye on someone who you think actually they could do a good job. You've been an MP for a long time now. You know these people. You see them in the tea room. Penny, Priti, Suella, Tugundat, Robert Jenrick.
Well, my view at the moment is I support Rishi Sunak in this, and I want to explain why. Now, I do want to explain why.
You're no fun, George, honestly.
The truth is, and it comes back to these various defections. You know, Rishi Sunak does not deserve having these defections. He is absolutely working his socks off. He's doing it against an incredibly difficult backdrop. He's inherited a very difficult set of circumstances, both internationally and with the economy as well.
I know, but he was the Chancellor.
He's
so
worked very hard.
His own legacy.
Yes, but look what he's
inherited his own legacy of spending billions on furlough and beyond.
Well, but he's also now got inflation back under control. That's coming down.
True.
The economy's back in
this
growth.
Week,
I think he's been, at this juncture, what we needed, a steady hand on the tiller to basically stabilise the economy, which is so important, to get that back in shape. I think he's done that. And I think the party's got to really just get behind him and show loyalty and go into this election. And noise is off, and people thinking it looks clever for them to defect. We just need to have a reality check and actually get behind the work Rishi Sunak's doing. He's working his socks off to get this party re-elected.
We know he's working hard.
We owe it to him to get behind him and support him in this election.
We are fast running out of time, George. I just wanted to ask you really quick answer. Water pollution, the state of the Thames, the state of our rivers. As a former Environment Secretary, in a nutshell, should water companies be doing more about this? I mean, our audience is exasperated, angry and frustrated about this issue.
Well, if you look at the Thames, the big decision to solve that problem was actually taken 10 years ago when I was in the department, and it's the Thames Tideway Tunnel. It's a massive piece of infrastructure about to open.
Yes.
And so long before people were talking about water pollution in the news, DEFRA was on the case. So
do you have confidence that will help clean up the Thames?
Absolutely. It's a huge infrastructure project.
Rivers?
And it's going to, when you get flash rainfall, it's going to take all of that pollution up.
I'm told we have to go to the...
Well, and we have 56 billion to sort out other rivers as well, which is another commitment.
Thank you very much indeed to George Eustice.